There we go. Hi, thank you so much for joining us at Alta Asks Live. My name is Beth Spotswood. I'm Alta's digital editor. I feel like we all have the giggles. We just had a little visit before we went live. Joining me today, as usual, is Alta contributor, writer, teacher, awesome person in general, Heather Scott Partington, who will be interviewing and engaged in discussion with educator, author, and poet Sara Borjas. Sara's poetry, two pieces of Sara's poetry are in our current issue right now. We are thrilled to have her at Alta Asks Live today. If you've got a question, everyone likes your new hair, Sara. Or a compliment, please ask so in the comments. There's also a question button. I'm going to add a link right now to independentbookshop.org so you can buy Sara's book if you're interested in checking that out. But otherwise, I'm going to get lost and let Heather and Sara take it away.
Thanks, Beth. Hi, Sara. Thank you for joining us. Oh, I can't hear you. Are you there?
Yeah. How about now?
Okay, I gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm excited to talk about your book, Heart Like a Window, Mouth Like a Cliff. But before we get into it, I wanted to just start a little bit differently. One of the things about your work that has really struck me as I've been reading your poetry that's in the magazine, even your bio that you gave us at the magazine, is your work really draws attention to helps us, I think, put our attention in different places and think about what we give space to and what we give our attention to, that our attention is almost a form of currency, and that by elevating certain voices that we allow issues to get out there that have otherwise been kind of squashed. So I know this seems maybe a little bit heavy, but before I get into the questions that I want to ask you, I just wanted to ask you where your attention has been lately and what has been important to you over the last couple months.
Over the last couple months, the most important thing has been, and has always been, decentering whiteness, and centering Black lives, centering and using platforms like Alta, like your bio as a writer, any chance you get to use, and many of us who are writers have those privileges, centering the fight for Black liberation, and not just talking about it, in our privileged circles like we tend to do, and we get lost in them. So that's what I've been doing pretty much daily. And so I was excited to have poems at Alta because it's not what I've been up to.
Yeah.
I talk poems too.
Yeah. You in the book you mention teaching, and you mention that your approach to teaching is a little bit different, that in terms of pulling what would be considered academic materials traditionally, that you're interested in pulling those kinds of things in, but that you also like to bring in, that you like to highlight other voices. Can you talk about some of the things that at UC Riverside that you have brought into your classes in order to do that, to help celebrate other voices that aren't traditionally recognized in the classroom?
Well, I think, the most powerful thing we can do is organize a equitable reading list. And I think most students, and me included, have spent our whole life reading white writers in a Eurocentric canon. And so best and quickest thing that you're going to have to do anyways is create an equitable reading list for your students. Those don't just have to be poets. They can, I think something that's what I try to do is include other genres or hybrid genres or things that challenge the idea of genre and challenge the idea of categorization, which also ultimately we end up talking about marketing and capitalism and what effect that has on art, period. Something else that I like to do is center musicians. So ways that, bands and artists are doing the same thing that I'm doing, and a band that it is problematic, but that I've always looked up to, especially the narrative, is No Doubt. The performance group, Osco. these are artists that are doing the same things with different mediums, and students need to see that, because I think part of the responsibility of writers and those who are teaching is to demystify what it is to write, what it is to teach, what it is to publish. And that includes, there's not one narrow road, you know? And so I think demystifying that, making it accessible, and showing the spectrum and allowing the student then to choose what resonates with them is something that's important to do, and it's fun.
Yeah. What excites you when you see your students' work? What makes your what gives you goosebumps? What, you know, draws your attention when you see it happening with your students?
I think when they say something they've never said out loud before, but they always knew, to see that kind of like relief that they get when they say something, that's the moment. Like, that's the moment of the whole quarter. So also to see them challenge their own aesthetics and why they have those aesthetics is super exciting, because it's not just discussing, like, it's centering these voices and narratives which have been centered that don't include us. It's just not representative. Just to see them open up to challenge and include equitable representation for themselves, to put themselves in their own work. It is, you know, corny as it is, like, it's fucking revolutionary. Yeah.
I think that, you know, another thing that really stood out to me about your work is kind of what you're just talking about right now, the idea of speaking the unspeakable, and especially in your family, and thinking about what was maybe allowed to be said or what was encouraged to be said, and then your family's reaction, you know, when your work really speaks to some things that are personal, speaks to conflict with your parents and within your family. Has it been difficult since your book was published, or since those poems were published? Is there still an ongoing conversation that's happening with your family about what you can reveal and what their reaction is to that?
I think well, I'll say this. There's a couple of things. Is that it's not difficult for me for the person I am, because I'm not one that can. I'm not strategic sometimes, and maybe I'm not tactful, but I'm always. When something's weighing on me, I do have to confront it for my own well-being. And so in my writing and my poetry, I feel like, you know, that's what comes through, and that's not new to my family. So that way, it wasn't difficult. I think what has happened, like, because of now having my personality translated through the poems with my family, is that we can have discussions a little more. Nothing is healed, and there are still wounds, but they're outside of us. Like, they're this thing that you can look at, and like, my dad could read. My dad's here. Hi, Dad. And my dad could read. You know, my mom can read and see how I see them, but it's not so direct, and we can actually have conversations and reflect over it too. It didn't change our life. You know, my dad's still who he is. I'm still who I am. And we're still being affected by our parents' lives and our parents' parents' lives and all the things we've done to survive. But it's just created like more space to have conversations. And I think I'm really lucky about that. And while at the beginning, it wasn't necessarily like, my dad wasn't about talking poems all the time. The more we do, the more he does, and the more down he is, the more he gets it. And you know, and my sister's a writer as well, but he's starting to write his own stuff.
Oh, wow.
To me and record his stories. And my grandpa's like, hey, I got a lot of stories. Like, and I sent him a voice recorder recently. And I was like, here's some questions, record it.
Oh, that's great.
And I feel like it kind of empowers your family to be like, my life is actually important and meaningful.
Yeah.
And that suffering can be beautiful sometimes too.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And a lot of your work deals with Fresno. I would say, if I was going to write the cliche book review about it, I would say it's a love letter to Fresno. But I think it goes deeper than that. I think it's really it's about loving something, but also seeing that it can be incomplete, or that it can be problematic, or that the world can look down on it while it's still something really beautiful. It's this really complicated kind of love. And are there things that you wish people knew about Fresno that they don't know? Do people have assumptions about what life is like in Fresno?
Oh yeah, they think we're just like, I remember one time, I think it was a movie I was watching, and they were like, Fresno is the armpit of America. And I live in LA, and I encounter a lot of folks when I say, where you're from, and they're like, you're not from here. And I'm like, yeah, I'm from Fresno. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like, for what? When were you there? Like, what happened? And they're like, oh, nothing. And so in ways, it's just that what we don't know, what people don't know about Fresno is like what is most harmful. So like things that you can know, like, is all the folks that are there. What's a trip is that, all that farmland, Central Valley, has been a refuge for, Armenian folks that were fleeing Armenian genocide, like Hmong folks fleeing. And now, there's a lot of like influx of refugees from like Saudi Arabia, Yemen. And my sister's English teacher, so she teaches ESL classes. And so just year to year, just seeing the demographic of students, it is a place like a sanctuary for people who are fleeing violence and genocide outside of the United States. And they come and they make a whole life there. And so the community is like super diverse, like mad Punjabi folks, Filipino folks, Hmong folks, Latinx folks. And it's really rich, and it's really tight. We're really tight in a way that I think you go to other cities and it's more segregated, and there's like a cultural barriers kind of. There's something about Fresno that just keeps us together, and I think it has to do with some of that history.
Do you see your work as being in conversation with other poets? So, a lot of your poems in the collection are written in the same style as other poets' work, or in response to or including lines from. Is that a part of how you see your work, how you create your work as being in a dialogue?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think I see it that way because it is like it just the plain like it just straight is. It is in conversation and with other work, because if my work is my life and their work is their life, and our lives are inextricable. And I think what I write in the book, like whereas as far as like mentioning and using lines from other writers, is those are the lines that served as like gestations for my own thinking, and they kind of challenged something I already thought. So I had to look through that work or that line or that thought to see myself. And that's something I think when we talk about like conversations, it's really like seeing ourselves through each other. And it happens in the poems, but it happens when we chat all day too,
What about form? The poems in the collection are in, you experiment with form a lot. Sometimes, very little on one page, sometimes multiple columns and stanzas next to each other, kind of being in conversation with each other. Do you write in all different forms all the time?
I think when I'm writing, I'm more focused on the content than the form, and sometimes it'll come out that way. But what as far as like my approach to form is, I'm just challenging all form. Like everything that I've learned, everything I've known, everything that I do should challenge that, you know. And so like if you're looking at the book, there's like a sonnet that's split in a binary, right? And it's like 2 columns. There's another poem where the same thing is a contrapuntal, where you can read it across and down. And I do that to challenge the content. Once it's written, I do this to challenge the content. Like, does it still stand? Does it mean something else now? Like, is it compounded? Is it complicated? And I think the form and challenging the simplicity of it enriches your work in the way it should have been. It can and should have been enriched all along. You know, we're more complicated than the poems give off. And I think sometimes, especially when I'm teaching, you know, a new writer will be like, I don't have anything to say, or I don't know what to write about. I keep writing about the same thing. And form, I feel like, is a way to challenge things that we feel just are. They are not just there. They've been given and taught and inherited for reasons that don't serve us and don't serve our humanity. So just by challenging the forms alone enriches it. And that's what I tried to do in the book. And the second poem in the book is 5 pages, and it's like a bunch of blocks of text. And that's actually an essay that I reformatted to make it more true. And so now it's, the cyclical thinking of the constant doubt, as a woman, as a person of color, constantly being gaslit and resisted and internalizing that type of oppression. I hope that the form works to serve and represent that struggle, like minute to minute in your most honest times, and I didn't think that I was doing that until I changed that essay into that form.
That's great. What have you been reading lately?
I have been reading Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. I'm in a bunch of reading groups, so we're assigning stuff to each other. We're reading a bunch of stuff. I'm in a couple other groups where we're reading a lot of Robin Kelly, Joy James, really mostly a bunch of abolitionists, revolutionary writing. I'm not really reading a lot of poetry or prose. So I will say, though, I'm about to read and keep going back to read Audre Lorde all day. Her work is more important than ever. And I'm also looking forward to reading a book that I just got in the mail. It's Joshua Escobar's Bareback Nightfall. And I actually saw him do a reading recently for his book launch, and I just got super excited about that work. It's really tender, and in a time when I forgot about being tender, and so that is a poet I'm looking forward to reading. Also, Borderland Apocrypha by Anthony Cody is a trip. If you haven't seen it, I ordered it, I got it, I actually got it from the author. He's diagramming sentences, and they're over and over pages, and it's published by Omnidon, and Omnidon always takes risks as far as form goes. That editing team is doing us all a favor. And
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I would love to see that. That sounds phenomenal.
It's really cool. Yeah, so those are the poems I'm looking forward to, and then I'm also just reading a lot of essays. I think Just Rose White Flights is really important for me right now, as far as centering whiteness in thought, to decenter it and see how white writers think and why they're doing what they're doing. And I really appreciate Just Rose doing that work. Yeah, so check that out for sure.
I will. Do you have something that you would like to read for us today?
Yeah, I do. I'm going to read a poem actually from my book. And I was talking, to you earlier. I've just gotten out of a bargaining meeting. I work for the UC system, so I'm a lecturer there. We're bargaining our contract, and so I think this poem feels right. Being a part-time teacher at the university and being a brown one, so it's called "Study of a Part-Time Pocha." Just a quick, so for those of you who don't know what pocha means. It's like a derogatory term that you call whitewashed Mexicans. Usually Mexican folks call Mexican Americans this. So, study of a part-time pocha. We power dress, clack down the hall in our high heels, although we know it's quite pathetic. We perform like a Western academic, all tidy and linear, all holding office hours and shit, scaffolding the curriculum. We pose cross-legged in a room, lit like a spaceship, with no one to take us higher, never shouting, never crying, never doing anything truly dramatic like the oldies taught us, like our parents did, screaming at each other, leaving and coming back into the room to apologize. We fill the dean's dinner table with our brown body. We eat the crumbs of the institution, saying, like it's cake. We are not TV stars, but we convince. We write politically no matter what we write, even if we say, I like surprises, or I woke up today with my hands, or I love. It is against an expectation that we suffer. Let's not treat our presence like an occasion or accept it as lineage. The way we go is not an opportunity or a pattern in concrete. It's twice the work, much like a beautiful nail job, much like making the men believe it was their idea. And the gatekeepers know that we know what we know. I would rather spend time just centering all this whiteness, both inside and outside this mouth. I see no reason to go on being a Christian in hell. Let's scare white people with our Spanglish. Let's make up fake Spanish and talk to each other in the faculty kitchen real loud. Let's play Cuco and Chicano Batman during class. This performance is over. I'd rather wear a t-shirt repping Fresno to class, teach only brown poets, and not ever rationalize it to myself before I send out the syllabus. Order pizza for my 8 a.m., assign feminist texts alongside the Real Housewives, because they were the first case of multiple all-female protagonists I saw on a major network. Let's refuse these half-assed invitations to assimilate or refuse to treat our assimilation as an invitation. No one ever expected us to be here. No, director of the MFA program, I do not need to use higher diction. No, chair of the department, I do not believe poetry needs a good reason to not adhere to a traditional Eurocentric form. Yes, pocha studies, our Chicano studies, our American studies. Yes, white woman who evaluates me, race is a problem in our workshops. And no, I will not teach whiteness and call it craft. Dulce Maria Loinaz once wrote, I remain myself, but I constantly lose my center, or what I thought my center was, or what my center will never be. Then Natalie Diaz said, don't believe them when they tell you brown people fuck better when they're sad. Then I wrote, I'm hella sad and hella proud. When I fuck, I'm all up in my body. This is my house. Us pochas work so hard, we disaster our whiteness until even mestizaje disappears.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your brilliant work. I would say, actually, I'm going to say your brilliant and unsettling work. I think it's unsettling in the best way, and it's challenging. It's full of beauty. It's full of sadness. It's full of love. It's a gift. So I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you joining us today. And we're going to have Beth come back with questions from the viewers.
Oh, thank you.
All right, here I am. I was so excited to hear a Chicano Batman reference that I was like, ooh, here. Right, so guys, we wrote about Chicano Batman a while ago. We're already fans. The first question I want to ask, just because it's from former Alta Asks Live guest Alex Espinosa. tell us about your fabulous new look.
Fabulous new book?
Your look, your new wear. We know all about your fabulous new book.
Oh yeah, I just dyed my hair blonde. You can tell I've always wanted to do it, and never had the gumption to do it. So like, well, I don't really have anything to lose at this point. I'm visiting a friend out of town for a few weeks, helping him move, and so I was like, well, if I don't like it, I don't see anybody I know except him. So only one person can talk shit, but so far so good.
That's very healthy. Someone's asking, can you recommend any writers for humor and absurdity?
Humor and absurdity. Okay, for humor, humor and absurdity, actually. Roque Dalton, he's a Salvadoran writer. He has a book, it's collected. I don't have it, but it's called Small Hours of the Night. And he is my man. He is like one of my main inspirations. He's political, he's sentimental, he's all up in his feelings. He's absurd. He makes you feel absurd because we all are. It's a trip. So Roque Dalton for sure. Carmen Jimenez Smith's book, Be Recorder, is funny and devastating because it really questions and challenges like our capitalistic tendencies. And that book just, you're trapped, you're trapped in it. And it's funny at the same time. Other humorous writers, I would say Andres Montoya too. He had one book. He was a Chicano writer. He died at a really early age, and he has a book called The Ice Worker Sings. And I would also suggest funny, also devastating, Joseph Rios' Shadowboxing. And it's cool because a lot of those poems, and that's also from Omnidon, are formatted as like scenes and acts and plays. And just the whole way it's set up, it's funny, but it also like will mess you up.
Yeah. We're really running out of time. There's one question you touched on it certainly in your conversation with Heather, but Blaze, our managing editor, loves your poem, and has a very specific reference. Page 19 of your book, the poem "We're Too Big for This House." He really loves the mix of poetry, prose, footnotes. Some text is italicized. What are you trying to? Are you trying to get the reader to feel anything?
I'm trying to get the reader to see me, see myself, and how I see myself in the work of seeing yourself. And hopefully through that, see how they see themselves from day to day, and it's not just like, you're not living on a linear life, you're living in the past, present, future, you're referencing shit all back and forth, memories, your parents' memories, all the things you have to resist, all the things you have to kind of clutch and hold on to even like love somebody or tell them you love them or to walk out the door. That poem is, I'm hoping you can see all the labor it takes for me, and I think it extends to anybody at all intersections of identity, but especially women, we're not taught, we're constantly questioned and asked to explain ourselves and they're like, or like we don't get it, so they just say it the same thing they just said in different ways if we don't know what the fuck they said. But it's just like, it's so much work. And so I hope that poem makes the reader work so that they have to see what it's like to just think sometimes.
Interesting answer. I wasn't expecting that. I didn't see that one coming out. All right. Well, we're out of time with the fabulous Sara Borjas. If you're interested in checking out her work, you can click on the green button. It'll take you to bookshop.org, which supports independent booksellers, which we care very strongly about. And of course, pick up Alta. Two of Sara's poems appear in the current issue of Alta. If you're new to Alta Asks Live or have been coming to these, you can actually just subscribe to our channel on Crowdcast and you'll get reminded whenever we have a new guest. Like next week, we will be joined by Steve Erickson. We're going to talk about science fiction in film. and on screen, and how it has had to work to catch up with modern day humans. So tune in on Wednesday at 12:30 Pacific time for that. Otherwise, Heather, of course, thank you. Sara, you are wonderful, and we're honored to have you here and in our magazine. Thank you, thank you. And thanks to everyone else. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Thank you.